So what type of risk do bond investors face? Well, there are two main types: interest rate or maturity risk and reinvestment rate risk. Interest rate risk is present because, as we know, a change in interest rate, which is our discount rate, affects the price of a bond. Note that if an investor holds his bond until maturity, the changes in price won't affect him, and thus he does not have to worry about interest rate risk. This is because his final value that he's going to get when he sells off the bond is going to be the promised par value that he signed into when he initially bought the bond. So the only time interest rate risk comes up is if you're planning on selling your bond before maturity, because that price that you'll be able to sell it at depends on the current interest rate. Reinvestment rate risk is present because the potential interest that an investor can earn once he receives either the coupon payments or the par value from the bond is uncertain. For example, if the interest is 10% when you buy a bond, and then immediately after it falls to 8%, your realized yield over the life of the bond will be less than 10%. This is because your coupons are earning less once you reinvest them than you originally thought they would. So which bonds bear what type of risk more heavily? Well, long-term bonds have low reinvestment rate risk and high interest rate risk. By buying a long-term bond, you're essentially earning the coupon rate for as long as you hold on to the bond. So, even if the interest rate changes, as long as you hold on to the bond, you don't have to worry about reinvesting the par value at a lower rate. You still have to worry, though, about reinvesting the coupons at the lower rate. It's just not as big of a concern. This is why reinvestment rate risk is low. However, because the price of a bond varies indirectly with the interest rate, if the interest rate ever increases and you want to sell the bond, you will incur a capital loss. Because the bond is long-term, there's a greater chance that this will happen. This is why long-term bonds have a high interest rate risk. Short-term bonds are the opposite. They have high reinvestment rate risk and low interest rate risk. Because the investor will receive the par value of the bond in a short period of time, he has to worry about what to do with the money. If that interest rate falls, he must reinvest that par value at a lower rate. This is why reinvestment rate risk is high for short-term bonds. Alternatively, if the interest rate were to rise, the short-term bondholder won't be locked into this bond for long before receiving the full par value. Then he will be able to buy a new bond at the higher interest rate. This is why short-term bondholders face a low interest rate risk. The size of the coupon payments also affect the risk of the bond. If the coupon rate is low, the bond has less reinvestment rate risk, but more interest rate risk. This is because low coupon bonds distribute a greater percentage of their cash flows later on in the form of the par value. If the coupon rate is high, the bond has more reinvestment rate risk, but less interest rate risk. This is because high coupon bonds distribute a greater percentage of their cash flows earlier on in the form of coupon payments. So it's all about the timing of the cash flows. If a greater percentage of your cash flows comes earlier on, you have to worry about reinvestment rate risk. If a greater percentage of your cash flows comes later on, you have to worry more about interest rate risk. So in summary, if the bond is long-term and has low coupon payments, it faces high interest rate risk and low reinvestment rate risk. If the bond is short-term and has high coupon payments, it faces low interest rate risk and high reinvestment rate risk. There's something investors can do to mitigate the effects of these risks. The duration of a bond is the specific holding period that allows an investor to recover full coupon payments and principal relative to the current price. So, if an investor holds the bond this amount of time, his rate of return will be equal to the coupon rate of the original bond. Think of duration as a way to hedge yourself against changes in interest rate, which otherwise could affect your realized yield. The definition of duration is the sum of the weighted cash flows, so the sum of the time period of the cash flow, T, times the cash flow that occurs in that time period, divided by 1 plus r raised to the t, so brought back to the present. The sum of all of those cash flows, the present value of all the cash flows of the bond, divided by the original price of the bond. So let's look at an example of calculating the duration of a bond. Suppose we have a 3-year bond that has a 6% semi-annual coupon. If the investor's rate of return is 10%, calculate the duration of this bond. Our coupon payments are the coupon rate of 6% divided by 2 because they're semi-annual, times the par value of the bond, the $1,000, and that gives us coupon payments of $30. Let's use a table to find the present value of all of these weighted cash flows. And so here we see a table just to organize our different cash flows. In time period 1, the first 6 months, our only cash flow is the coupon payment, is of $30. So when we weight that by the time period, well, since the time period is 1 times 30 still gives us 30. Now we just need to find the present value of that, and we find the present value at 5% because the discount rate, the rate of return, is 10%, but again, we're dealing with 6-month periods, so we have to divide that 10% by 2 to find our semi-annual discount rate of 5%. So when we do that, we see that the present value is $28.57. We do the same thing for the second cash flow, but this time the weighted cash flow of $30 times the period 2 is going to give us a weighted cash flow of $60. So we find the present value of that $60, and it's $54.42. We do the same thing for the third cash flow. Of the weighted cash flow is $90, and the present value is $77.75. The weighted cash flow in time period 4 is $120, so the present value is $98.72. The weighted cash flow for the 5th year is $150. The present value is $117.53. And in time period 6, which is the 6-month period, so year 3, the end of the bond's life, we have 2 cash flows. We have a $1,000 par value and a $30 coupon payment, our final $30 coupon payment. So the total cash flows in period 6 is $1,030. Now we have to weight this by the time period, which is 6. So we take the 6, multiply it by the 1,030, and the weighted cash flow is 6,180. We just find the present value of this by dividing by 1 plus the 5% raised to the 6, and we see that the present value of this weighted cash flow is the $4,611.61. The sum of these present values is $4,988.60. We just add up the present value, that last column of the table that we just calculated for all 6 cash flows. Now, we must find the current price of the bond. There are 6 periods of 6 months, so we enter in 6 for the number of periods. The coupon payment is $30, so we enter in this for the payment. The discount rate is 5% every 6 months. The par value is $1,000, so we enter this in for the future value. Now we find the price to be negative $898.49. Again, it's negative because that's what we're willing to pay today. That would be a cash outflow for us if we were to purchase this bond. Thus, the duration, again, is the sum of the weighted cash flows, the present value of the weighted cash flows in the numerator, divided by the current price of the bond. Well, we found the weighted cash flows to be $4,988.60 and the price to be $898.49, so the duration is 5.5522. Now this is the duration in 6-month periods, since our periods were 6 months. To find the duration in years, we need to just divide this by 2. So we do that and we see that the duration of this bond is 2.776 years.